Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Patricia McParland. As we near the end of this year, it's that time to look forward to what's next. And our guest, Patricia McParland, is head of cyber product marketing at MetricStream, a leading GRC provider. Pat, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Boris. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Patricia, could you tell us a short story about your career path? What brought you to where you are right now, and what does your current role involve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a career-long B2B product marketing and marketing communication leader. I have been in the business information and financial industry for more than 30 years. I have worked at companies like Dow Jones, Dun & Bradstreet, all in financial and risk management information. I've worked for a number of startups, and most recently I joined MetricStream about a year and a half ago, and I'm focused now on cyber risk and cybersecurity, not a totally new area, but really for me, but an evolution of risk management. So obviously a really fascinating area with all the things happening in the world today around cyber risk and related areas like GRC.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's absolutely. This is fascinating area, and all over the news every day, we hear all the time about some scandals and problems with big companies, big and small. So I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on what's ahead for cyber risk management and GRC in total in 2023 with some actionable tips. So Patricia, could you tell us what are the biggest changes you have seen in cyber risk and cyber GRC this year?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, cyber risk changes all the time. I mean, if we look over the years and we see the number of, data breaches piling up, for example, I mean, one resource that I follow regularly is the Ponemon Institute. So they put out a report every year with IBM, the cost of a data breach, and we see the number of data breaches and the cost of a data breach going up. And so this year was the highest ever. The cost of a data breach globally has reached $4.4 million. So huge, obviously huge financial and business impacts of data breaches. So that's one thing that is a constant change, if you will. So we've seen the escalation of things like ransomware and all those sorts of things. But a really sea change that I've seen that we see at MetricStream is really the connection and collaboration of risk management functions coming together to manage cyber risk and cybersecurity. So no longer managed in silos. So if you think about different pieces of cyber risk and related governance, risk, and compliance, think about things like your third parties, for example, a huge source of cyber risk. In the past, we were talking maybe 5-6 years ago, they may have been managed only by the third-party risk department. And the compliance department managing their compliance risks, and then the IT risk department managing their IT risks. And today we see people really working hand in hand. So that's kind of one of the biggest changes I think that we've seen is this whole idea of connection and collaboration. And it kind of makes sense if you think about, the hackers are collaborating as well. They're looking for the
they have
the
network
hotspots and all that, right? And so, and you see the companies in the industry coming together and collectives and things like that. So if I had to pick, there are a couple themes that I see emerging, but one is really this whole idea of connection and collaboration.
All right. So, and let's drill a little bit around cyber GRC and cyber risk. What are the business cases that your solution solves the best in the area, in the eyes of your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a number of different things. I mean, obviously, MetricStream is first and foremost a governance, risk, and compliance solution. And in the area of cyber risk, we focus on managing IT risks. So looking at risks that are related to your IT assets, your IT processes across your organization. Most of the people that use MetricStream for managing their IT risks do also look at that in conjunction with their other types of risks, because what they're looking for is visibility across the enterprise, and what does my risk exposure look like generally. So that's one use case, is managing IT risks and doing risk assessments and things like that. Another is IT compliance. So am I compliant with different standards? For example, if I'm a healthcare company, am I compliant with HIPAA? If I'm a payment company, am I compliant with PCI? Do I want to use things like NIST to create best practice cybersecurity standards? So, the MetricStream Cyber GRC solution comes with a complete library of all those standards built in, and then also allows for monitoring of those standards and frameworks and controls. So I would say compliance and controls is another area. And then another area, which is more emerging, but is kind of exciting to me at least, is the area of quantification. So we're seeing a lot of interest in cyber risk quantification, and which makes, obviously today people do a lot of cyber risk analysis in a qualitative way. So things like, I'm going to assess my risk red, yellow, green, or high, medium, low, and do those kinds of scorings. But quantification is more, what's the dollar value of this risk? And using models, you may be familiar with a model like FAIR Institute. That's one. So that's one that we use. You can also modify that, but using different factors, for example, you can put them in and then say, based on these factors and how likely these risk events are to occur, what's the dollar value of this risk? And why that's important is because it creates that connection between the CISO and the IT team and the leadership team and the board, because it creates sort of a lingua franca or a common language to explain IT risk in terms that everybody understands. So everybody understands currency or dollars and cents, and it's much easier to be able to prioritize your risk and make decisions on which risks to focus on, because obviously there's so many, you can't focus on them all and prioritize.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
All right.
so those are the three I would say.
Great. So if you just outlined what you saw this year and what your company is focused on, and maybe you can a little bit tell us what you see as emerging trends in the near future with regard to cyber risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if I had my crystal ball, I do have my little video light here, but it's not giving me the exact trends. But a couple of exciting areas or things that we see emerging are, one is really about automation and having processes be more run by machines and artificial intelligence. So I'm going to put automation and AI together. And one example that I use is what I mentioned before about monitoring the effectiveness of things like controls. And, people have been monitoring risks and things like that for years. But the effectiveness of your controls in security, for example, you can put in controls to make sure that people have things like multi-factor authentication, for example. But are those controls effective? And today the process is typically I'm going to test a sample of those controls and make sure that they're working, or I'm going to test those manually. But increasingly we see people moving toward more what we think of as like autonomous processes, where those things are moving all the time, and the IT team can focus more strategically on, okay, I'm just going to get the results and analyze them, as opposed to doing all those manual processes. Or another example might be, analyzing third-party risks. Historically, people have had to, comb through all these long SOC questionnaires or other, SIG questionnaires, whatever, long questionnaires. And now machine learning can do that for them automatically and say, hey, here's what we think are the anomalies. And they can make decisions versus having to do all that basic work. So, and those are just some basic automation and AI examples. I think the predictive nature of those kinds of things and automating more things through like robotic process automation and those kinds of things, that's where we see the biggest things happening, is in those areas. But another area I'm going to say is integration of tools coming together. Because if you see, I read a stat, it's not the most positive stat in the world, okay? But it said that if I'm a CISO or a cyber risk leader, it's one of the most stressful jobs in the world. In fact, the stat I saw said 100% of CISOs are stressed out, right? Because they're having everything coming at them at once. And so how can we alleviate some of that stress? And one thing that they're looking at is not having so many different tools to deal with. They're looking to integrate and pull things together. And so I think that's another real trend. You know, things like putting systems that they're using, being able to integrate them together and have content come together into one place. So making everything that they have work together. So that's another trend. So I would say automation, integration, and as I referred to earlier, collaboration.
All right, fantastic. So if we summarize it, if someone who's listening to this interview would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would that be? Or maybe just what they, as a risk manager who is currently on the job, what they first priority should be to take action?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a couple of things is, and some of these are, you know, things that might seem rather obvious, but I think are important is, you know, the world is in an incredible state of volatility right now. If we look at everything, you know, the geopolitical turmoil, the amount of risk in the world, the amount of, you know, cyber activity. And I think the most important thing is to stay agile and have processes that help you be resilient. And one way to do that is to, especially when dealing with risk management, is to keep moving. And if you're not try to boil the ocean, you know, so if you're undertaking a GRC program or continue to update yours, is to start small and you start with one area as opposed to trying to tackle your entire enterprise and or your entire cyber program. Start with one piece and then show success and then move on to other pieces, you know, so kind of show that rolling success. That's one piece of advice that I have. Another piece of advice that I have is looking toward the automation and using of, you know, they're not even new technologies anymore, but things like AI and looking toward automation and ways to get away from some of the manual processes so that you can focus on the analysis and things like that are incredibly helpful, especially in things like, you know, the controls monitoring and those areas. And then the third thing I would say is looking at things in a holistic kind of view, you know, looking at risk not in silos, but in, you know, across your organization and partnering, you know, like, and we see a lot of partnership when we're at MetricStream, you know, we see heads of risk and heads of compliance working with the CISOs and, you know, creating documented risk management strategies. And they have, you know, steering committees where they meet regularly, like communication and collaboration. You know, they sound kind of like mom and apple pie sort of things, but they're critical to keeping everybody on the same page and combating risk together. So those are the three things that I would say.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Patricia. Those were all my questions. And I wish you, first of all, happy Thanksgiving in the United States and a great success in your current very challenging job. And perhaps we can speak another time with a more broad interview.
Yeah, that would be great. I will, I'll save you some turkey, Boris, and I hope to see you again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, you have a great one.